Hello Scary Ramblers and welcome to the final Makanori session for Tales from a Scarygirl Volume 1. Don't forget Volume 2 will be out later this year. I'm aiming for around Halloween, as would be fitting. But I've got one more tale to tell you from this particular collection. And this tale, again, is another one that's quite special to me. I suppose it was the prequel in a way to Bonds. It was a story I was working on along a similar kind of theme, but it didn't quite pan out into a full story. And of course, then I attended that wedding and we all know where that led to. So this is like I said, the last story in the collection, and I do hope you enjoy it. And this is called The Night Stalker. It is November and the nights have well and truly drawn in now. The red and gold glows of autumn have given way gracefully to the throes of winter. The trees, now stripped of their beauty, shiver as the wind bites through their barren branches, ripping the last of their dignity from them. The driving rain batters the cracked pavements, while the wounded call of the wind carries along the deserted streets. Jet black eyes scan the street, focusing on the sound. He raises his head slightly, his aquiline nose picking up the scent. Clinging to the shadows, he creeps forward, without a sound, never taking his eyes off his prey. Then, as if pausing for breath, the wind drops and the rain slows to a dull pattering. Silence envelopes the scene. The streets are calm, the elements exhausted. Nothing moves, nothing makes a sound. Well, barely. The clouds begin parting company to reveal the greenish glow of a new moon, casting the street in a dappled half-light. He dives into a doorway, chest heaving, but it's too late. He has been seen. His shoulders sag in defeat as he watches his quarry scurry away. Please, not another night like last night, he mutters. I just don't have the strength. It's his own fault. He's never left it too long between feeds, left it until it's almost too late. He hates hunting, he always has, but it's the only way he can survive, the only way he can sustain his pitiful existence. Tuesday night was a night like this one, except the wind and the rain were pounding the town into submission. At least the moon had kept its distance, giving him a fighting chance. He pulled his scarf around his face to keep out the rain, while the icy wind gnawed at his bare hands and dragged at his heavy coat. The wind didn't bother him. It never had, never would. Why? Because he couldn't feel it. The rain, however, that was a different story. It got in his way, it affected his coordination, and that was dangerous. As if sensing his annoyance, the rain slowed and he lowered his scarf, tucking it inside his coat. He hated nights like this. Nights when he had to keep moving, so his senses wouldn't become affected by the monotonous drone of rain, so he would not mistake the sound for something more important. He longed for a dry night, a night when he could hide and listen for what he wanted, for what he needed. Even the snow with its blanket of silence was better than this interminable racket. As if on cue, the pounding started again and he swore under his breath. He began walking like he did every night, listening and waiting. He was hungry, and if he didn't get something soon, he would be in trouble. He knew that. A door banged open across the street, and loud rock music rolled towards him through the veil of rain. The music intensified the pounding, which seemed to surround him, drawing him in, engulfing him, injecting its beat into him until he felt it pulsate in his veins. "Damn it!" he said as his head began to throb, his senses disorientated. He was not having a good night. Swarms of young people burst out into the street as the club emptied its contents for the night. He heard them screaming and shouting, jostling and fighting. He was getting weaker and knew he would have to make a move soon. He watched as they split into groups and went their separate ways. He followed as they drifted away, and as he rounded a corner he saw a small group of girls huddled under one umbrella. He drew back into the shadows to watch, to plan. "I'll ring my dad, he'll come and get us," a tall skinny redhead said. "And let him know where we've been? Yeah, great idea," another, whom he couldn't see, snorted. "No, I won't tell him. I'll just tell him to pick us up someplace else. And just tell me where in this god-awful place could we tell him to meet us?" "But I just want to go home. I don't feel too good," the redhead continued. He watched as the other two walked off, leaving the redhead to trail behind. He followed them, so close he could taste the alcohol in their breath, as they laughed and joked about their illicit night out. They never heard a thing. He shudders as he remembers that night. He hates doing that, but his instincts took over and he was powerless to stop. He swore that he would not let it happen again, that he would not let himself go so long between feeds. To do that, though, he would have to find a way to accept his fate. He would have to find a way to manage his fate. Resigned to another barren night, he leaves the shadows. The moonlight casts his face in a luminescent glow, his hollow cheeks dark in the half-light, his thick, heavy brows shadowing his eyes. He rakes a translucent, bony hand through his raven hair, the tracks visible in the shoulder-length mane. His brows furrow, and he purses his crimson lips as he wonders, once again, how he has ended up like this. How had he let this happen to him? How indeed, he says, leaning against a wall and resting his head against its cool, damp skin. He shudders as he remembers his sire, remembers his transformation. Why had he let it happen? He'd had no choice. If he hadn't, he would have died. His father had been gravely ill, and there had been no one else to take care of him. He couldn't have just left him to die. He'd loved him too much for that. His father had died the next day. Not wanting his friends to see the monster he'd become, he'd left the village and had spent his time on the move. He'd never stayed too long in one place, for fear that he would be discovered. That is how he'd existed for the past 248 years, for existing is all it had been. Although he knows what he is, he loathes it and rarely feeds on humans unless he's desperate. Sometimes the pain gets too much to bear and he has to give in to what he really is. What happened the other night was a mistake, a nightmare he knows will never go away. He can't believe how quickly they found her. Someone must have seen him. There's no other way she could have been found so quickly. He has to be more careful. He can't afford to let that happen again. Can't afford to let himself get so weak. He has to survive, but there's only one way he can survive. He gags at the thought and slides down the wall to the ground. What is he going to do? He is so hungry. Just then he hears a scream and, jumping to his feet, heads towards it. As he rounds a bend, he sees a young woman being attacked by what appears to be an old man. His face changes as the monster within him takes over, the adrenaline flowing into his muscles, renewing the strength he is rapidly losing. He reaches the pair in an instant and hurls the old man to the ground. Jumping to his feet, the old man lets out a roar and launches himself at his assailant, his claws ripping his opponent's left cheek open like tissue paper. He can feel the blood running down his face and dripping onto his clothes. Summoning all his strength, he lunges at the old man, his razor-like nails slashing through the man's throat. The old man clasps both hands to his neck, a look of shock in his watery eyes, and stumbles away into an alley nearby. He turns towards the young woman and sees the injuries on her neck. The wound is open, raw, the flesh glistening with the freshness of her blood. The scent is intoxicating and his gaze remains fixed on the puncture marks, laid bare for him, calling for him, drawing him in. He approaches her, her heartbeat pounding through his veins, his taste buds electrified, his hunger beyond redemption. His brain screams at him to turn away, to let her go. His brain reminds him of his vow. His brain reminds him of the other night, of his promise. But his hunger, oh, his hunger is so much stronger than his willpower. His hunger is what reminds him that he has to feed. His hunger is what reminds him that he has to survive. His hunger knows just what will take the pain away. But it didn't go away, he says, closing his eyes and forcing himself to turn away from her, to turn away from the addictive scent. He has to get away, he has to leave. If he doesn't, "Help me," the girl whispers, and the sound freezes him in his tracks. He knows that voice. He hears it every day as she laughs and jokes with her classmates, while he sits and watches, waiting for the right time. "No!" he shouts and rushes to her side, grabbing her chin and turning her face towards him, causing her to groan at the ferocity of his grip. It is her. Her hair, though matted and tangled, is the colour of straw and hangs down her back in thick waves. Her eyes, which he knows are the colour of the sea, are closed now, their spacing on either side of her small upturned nose giving her a bewitching look, the very look he had fallen for when she first walked into his class 6 months ago. "Help me," she mutters again, and her eyes flutter. He panics, not wanting her to see him, to recognise him. It isn't time. "Shh," he says as he feels for her pulse, thin, thready. She's lost so much blood. "Damn it," he says, and punches the wall behind him, the stonework crumbling beneath his fist. It's too soon. She isn't ready. But if he doesn't, then she'll die. Then he'll never get the chance. He bites his wrist, tearing open the flesh, and then he pushes it to her lips, angling it so blood runs into her mouth. Once she tastes it, her survival instincts will kick in. They always do. As if on cue, she begins to draw on him and he braces himself. He has to be careful. He doesn't have much. He needs to feed. He can feel his body getting weaker as she drinks, and he only just manages to pull away from her, only just manages to summon the strength. She sighs and her head lolls to one side. He leans back against the wall for support, to steady the dizziness and nausea that now threaten to consume him. He casts a sideways look at her and sees that the wounds on her neck are starting to heal. It's working, he thinks, and closes his eyes for a moment to let himself recover. His eyes snap open, his senses alert. He fell asleep. How stupid. Now dawn is approaching. Soon he will be out of options. He has to move now. He hauls himself to his feet and bends to pick up the woman. As he does so, blood drips onto her blouse and fans out across the thin fabric. The wound on his cheek still hasn't healed. He heaves her into his arms and her head rests against his shoulder, her scent wafting into his nostrils, making him shudder. He starts to run. He prays she doesn't wake up, doesn't see him, doesn't recognise him, for she cannot know his secret, not yet. As he lays her down on her front doorstep, she stirs and he freezes. Without opening her eyes, she reaches out and touches the gash on his cheek. "Thank you," she says, and drifts away again. He relaxes. That was too close. He reaches out to ring the doorbell and then merges back into the breaking dawn, his ears tuned back into the creatures of the night, his salvation. So there you have it, the end of Makanori for Tales from a Scarygirl, Volume 1. I really do hope you've enjoyed the stories I've been telling you, and if you want to, you can view them all again on my YouTube channel, so please just go over and find those. Obviously, the book's available both in Kindle and paperback if you want to own them for yourself and have another read. That would be absolutely amazing. But until I, see you again, I'm sure I'll be back. In fact, I know I will, because I'm going to be bringing you Bonds, which is the first volume in my Bond series. So hopefully you'll tune in to listen to that as well. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.